Ask about Illuminati, since the charting upbeat ducks. Is it Disney mind control? Is this MK Ultra Deluxe? Occult Disney, we go from real to real. Occult Disney, Bohemian Grove and no more real. Occult Disney, ask about Illuminati. Occult Disney, we teach occult to everybody. Occult Disney, the wish upon a star. Occult Disney, you know not to travel far. Oh, Occult Disney, the new brand Pinocchio. Yeah, yeah. Occult Disney, it's a boss overload. Occult Disney, please enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome to the Occult Disney podcast, where we are enchanted by movies made by the Walt Disney Corporation and then try to re-chant them, reverse chant them, something like that. Look for the secrets in them. I'm trying to make up new words. That's all I'm trying to do. I think I failed. Reverse chanting, that's a new word, right?
If you say so.
Okay. Hi, it's Matt here. It's Thomas over there. What up?
Hey, AKA Paranoid American, that's me. And you're on the Occult Disney podcast.
That is correct. I did say that. Yes. Okay. Have you seen this one before?
Definitely not.
Okay.
I thought I did,
Same
but
here.
As soon as it came on, I realized I had never seen this one.
I'm guessing, let's see, the date is 2007, is it? It might have, well, honestly, I don't think I was going to go see this anyway, but also it would have been playing, I would have been in Japan at that time, and it would have been playing like only dubbed in Japanese. So, that's kind of like I watch subtitles, but if it's just dubbed in Japanese and they're not talking English anymore, that's an out. That's a no. That's why I hadn't seen any movies from like October to February in the theater. They just didn't have any.
So what did you think of this one then?
Well, for me, as the guy that started a Occult Disney podcast, it's like after the first 10 minutes, you're like, oh, animation's gone. It's like, hey, I get the hand-drawn animation again, right? Which was fun. And then the rest of it kind of played like a mildly amusing rom-com, I guess.
Not bad. Yeah, I was wondering because I saw a bunch of screenshots from this, and I'm wondering what part was actually animated, and it's basically the first 10 to 15 minutes.
Right. So for me, in my attention span, that was easily the best part of the movie, right? Because it's kind of like Disney. When was it Chicken Little or Home on the Range where it started off with, here's a storybook and it's crap, right? They were like trying to do like Shrek it too hard. Like this seemed to be a much better balance of, oh, we're kind of making fun of ourselves, but we're not just like doing Shrek. I mean, the troll was a little Shrek-like, I guess, but yeah. I thought it was better than whatever it was several movies ago where they just did a really ham-fisted version of that.
See, and I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't dislike this movie. In fact, I found a whole bunch of what I think are sort of deep dives within it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a few of those. And there's one thing I did notice, though, is it had a bit of 80s comedy-itis, which I'll need to explain. For me, 80s comedy-itis is half the comedies from the 80s, like the first half is super funny, and then like, oh, the plot has to get in the way, or oh, it needs to get more sentimental, and then the second half of the movie is like kind of boring as hell. I thought Enchanted was definitely front-loaded, not just by the animation, but obviously the heavy fish out of water stuff's pretty funny, and then when Edward shows up again, you get a little bit more of that, but it's kind of it's chewing gum, right? The flavor wears out about halfway through for me.
I see that, and that's why they just have to throw a massive CGI dragon in at the end to, I guess, to compensate for that.
Which was kind of a bummer because, again, I really loved the animation at the beginning of the movie, which it's another one where in the production notes are like, oh, it was inspired by Art Nouveau. And I'm like, what? That seems to be a running theme where they're like, oh, we were inspired by this and that and early Looney Tunes. And you and I watch it and we're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, this review itself inspired by Art Nouveau. The words I'm speaking also inspired by Art Nouveau. This movie is a little bit unique in that it's got 3D CGI and 2D animation and live action all separate, like not interwoven and also separate though. So I don't know how many
Right.
other Disney movies have the trifecta like that.
Right. I mean, Roger Rabbit, well, it probably had a little bit digital going on, but that didn't have the CGI for sure. But that did blend things a lot more. This one, like you said, kind of keeps things separate, which also keeps the movie a little more production wise easy to make, because Roger Rabbit looked like a nightmare to make as far as blocking and things like that.
And this one also had a sequel that I discovered, although we're not going to get to that for quite a while because it came out in 2022, called
Right.
Disenchanted, which basically invites most of the cast members back, and I assume beats a dead horse down into the ground a little bit more.
Yeah, it was not well reviewed, so I guess they did not find the right key to continue that story. I mean, when the whole point of the movie is happily ever after, I guess you don't make a sequel.
Well, I mean, if it's called Disenchanted, I assume because this movie also firmly plants the flag into the sand where Disney is saying this is the Girlboss period. And I don't mean that in a bad way, and I definitely don't mean it metaphorically. They actually spell it out in case you weren't hip enough over the last 2 or 3 Disney movies that the power dynamic was going to get inverted. This time they explicitly state it. So I also feel that this movie in particular sort of becomes a milestone. At least if you care about the Disney culture war stuff, this does feel like someone planting a flag.
Yeah, and they were going to add Giselle, is that her name? They were going to add her to the Disney princesses, right? But one big problem. Can you guess what that problem is?
I mean, you're gonna have to tell me. I don't want to guess the wrong thing.
If you add Giselle to the Disney princesses, that means you also have the likeness of Amy Adams, meaning you have to pay her in perpetuity. So they're like, we don't want a princess that we have to pay this actress for,
Maybe, but I mean, there is a cartoon version of Giselle that you see at the beginning of the movie that doesn't. I mean, it just looks like a Disney princess,
right? But legally, that's still based on her likeness. So, I mean, that's what I'm reading here, so explaining why that didn't happen. So, can't trust everything you said on Wiki, but I thought that was kind of a fun story. They showed the toy at the 2007 Toy Fair. They had her packaged, and they realized they'd have to pay for lifelong rights to her image. Okay, so I don't know. Seems legit enough.
Someone caught it at the last second. They're like, nope, no, Amy Adams, you do not get to live in perpetuity along with the Disney global conglomerate that will outlive all of us. You don't get to be part of that.
I mean, it's like how Steven Spielberg hasn't had to do anything for 30 years if he didn't want to, because he gets $20 million a year just for putting his name behind, the Universal Studios theme parks.
I think the way that this would really work is that Disney would just have to own Amy Adams, and then they could put her out. But that's the only way that Disney would allow that to happen.
I guess that doesn't work because Amy Adams, obviously, her career changes a lot after this. It's kind of weird to watch this movie because I'm used to seeing her in like kind of hardcore movies, like American Hustle or The Arrival or something. So then seeing her in princess mode is kind of weird.
Right. Well, so I wanted to just do a quick little character intro to preface the typical kind of summary. But so this movie, since it does feature live action, there's a lot of people that I recognized. So this is Princess Giselle that we just kind of talked about. That's played by Amy Adams, who you might know from Lynn Chaney in Vice. He plays Dick Cheney's daughter. She's in Psycho Beach Party and Night Bitch. It also has King Edward Tremaine of Anastasia, who plays by James Marsden. And you probably know him either from Zoolander, where he played John Wilkes Booth, of all characters. And then Cyclops of X-Men is probably where most people are going to recognize this guy from. We've got Nathaniel, who's played by Timothy Spall. You'd recognize him if you saw him, but just by saying his name, I think most people might not know. He was in Dream Demon. He was in Rockstar, which is probably my favorite movie that I've seen him in, the one with Mark Wahlberg and Jennifer Aniston. And he was also in Vanilla Sky. So he was in some like a nice variety of kind of weirdo movies.
He's one of those guy faces, You'll
100%. You see him and he looks like a cartoon character. He looks very unique. Then there's Robert Phillip, who's played by Patrick Dempsey. He's in the show Dexter Origins, where he basically kidnaps and mutilates his own son. He's also in 1985's The Stuff, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. And he also plays Meyer Lansky in Mobsters from 91. So I don't know if you can sense a pattern, but a lot of these people in this movie so far have been in pretty hardcore movies. Then there's the evil stepmother, Narissa, who is Susan Sarandon, Witches of Eastwick, Thelma and Louise. Also Joe, which is a pretty hardcore movie. I don't know if you've ever seen Joe. I think it was the first movie that Susan Sarandon was ever in. It's pretty rough, but
I gotta shout out the Rocky Horror Picture Show because I've been to a theater to see that 50 times at least.
And then finally, the last, I guess, noteworthy name plays Nancy Tremaine. And last name, I give it away if you knew what these characters were. But Nancy is played by someone named Adina Menzel. And she basically played Elphaba in Wicked, and she's also the voice of Elsa in Frozen. So you might recognize her name even if you don't recognize her face.
I recognize her voice, yeah, for sure. It's also interesting the original script for this. Just bouncing into production a bit there, but it was going to be a kind of hard R movie that was going to be kind of an American Pie, Fast Times at Ridgemont High sort of comedy. Giselle was going to come from the fairy tale land and be mistaken for a stripper, that sort of stuff. So it's another one where the movie got changed a lot. Well, they just bought the script, so it's not like they kicked the guy off the movie. But yeah, he sold him the script and then it got rewritten 8 times until it became something you take your kids to, which, you know, it kind of makes sense business-wise.
Yeah, because it's not a Touchstone movie. That sounds like almost Touchstone area. That's
who bought the script.
So they were planning on making it a little bit raunchier than it ended up being.
Yeah, and it said it was originally going to be released in 2002. So it took a real long time for this one to sort of catch some fire and get made. A very long production, thing going on.
So you normally around now you tell me whether or not it was profitable. So was this a successful?
Oh hell yeah! They made a sequel. Yeah. Oh, very successful. Okay, looking at the numbers, 85 million on the budget, 340 on the box office. So nothing to sneeze at. This was a big hit for Disney at the time. Actually, it was one of their. I don't think they'd had many big hits, especially ones that had sort of their recognizable IP for a few years at this point. So this is kind of.
Well, I wonder what Disney took away. What was the lesson they took away from this? Since they did kind of have this weird shoehorned 80s sitcom, as you described it, plotline. They had a little bit of 2D animation, a whole bunch of live action, some 3D. So I wonder what you take away from this, because we don't really see a lot more of this kind of style that comes out of it.
No, speaking of the 2D animation, this is the first theatrically released Disney movie with 2D animation since Pooh's Hufflepuff movie. But it did seem to rekindle things briefly because we're going to get Princess and the Frog. That was the big return to, hand-drawn looking animation. And then the Winnie the Pooh one, which I keep playing up as being really good. And that's it. So it lit that fire, but the fire kind of went out pretty quickly, it seems.
Well, yeah, once you actually see how much resources it takes and the room's full of animators and how long all of the last minute redecisions take, especially in traditional animation, they probably favor the 3D stuff.
It's just interesting that, again, the Japanese stuff we looked at a few months ago had heavy computers working on it, that sort of thing, but they've maintained the 2D style, where Disney has completely dropped it. I don't think there's been one since Winnie the Pooh.
Maybe they've got some backroom deal where it's like, you guys take the 2D, we'll take the 3D and the Uncanny Valley stuff, and we'll meet back up in 2050.
Yeah, there is the occasional 3D Japanese stuff, like a Draimon, the robot cat from the future. There's a hand-drawn style movie for Draimon every year. And then maybe every 3 or 4 years, there's like, here's the CGI one, right? That comes out at a different time of year. So it's even there. It's like they're competing with themselves with 2D and 3D a bit.
It is weird because Disney used to imply a very specific aesthetic, and now that aesthetic is so varied, you're not really sure exactly what you're going to get just because a movie says Disney on the front of it.
Right. Well, it also depends what the logo looks like, right? Is it followed by the Marvel one? Well, you know what aesthetic that's going to be. Is it followed by the Lucasfilm thing? You know what aesthetics that's going to be. It was just pure Disney, especially animation. I feel like the current rule of thumb is probably Frozen. Am I wrong? Frozen Tangled sort of a thing. I feel like that's what we think of now as Disney animation, which I don't know. I mean, it's not really as cool as when you think of hand drawn Snow White stuff, but. I sound like an old fart saying that,
Yeah, exactly. That's the old fart part coming out, I think. Although I can't really. I wasn't, watching Snow White I watched it as a kid, but not when it came out. And I don't know. There's something that seems still timeless about it. When we watched it, it had been after seeing Marvel movies and all of the latest 3D and CGI, and it does hold up.
I mean, in my mind, we watched, Chicken Little and Meet the Robinsons, and the CGI there was pretty much looked like raw ass, right? But I feel like when we get to Tangled and Frozen, we're at least not going to be like, oh, this looks horrible. Maybe we'll see. Maybe it looks dated 12 years down the line or whatever,
Right. Well, this one, Enchanted, I do feel that the 3D parts did look dated, and it's a little bit cheating to consider this one animated because it was really. Again, like the first 5 to 10 minutes of the movie are animated and they go right into live action. So they might have been able to devote a lot more resources to a certain style, knowing that they only had to make 5 to 10 minutes worth versus 2 hours worth, because that would dictate the amount of detail and the fidelity and the frame rate and everything. So maybe they went a little bit extra just to flex a little bit, since it is Disney.
No, my notes is CGI Dragoness looks weird. Do not like the CGI. The rain doesn't even help, because usually that's like early CGI stuff like Jurassic Park. You have it raining because that covers up some of.
And at night, yeah.
And at night, and then even those, I'm like, this dragon still didn't look that good. So they used the tricks and it still didn't work. So that's too bad.
It was so unneat. We'll get there because that's the big payoff, I guess, big payoff ending. But it didn't need any of that. It felt so tacked on.
Right. Let's see if there's any. Music is Menken is back. Just he's Disney's guy. He's doing the music here. I'm just running through any notable production notes I need to throw out. Something bizarre that happened. This is the first Walt Disney Pictures. I guess they changed it from, what is it? I don't know. They changed their name and to whatever it is now, and this is the first one of those. So, yeah, I guess let's start diving a little deeper into this film then. Do you want to start working through the plot of it?
Yeah, I guess I'll do a really high level recap, because we'll go through a bunch of the subplots and all the stuff kind of like bit by bit. So the premise is that we have an actual Disney princess, and she's got an evil, wicked stepmother, all of the formula that you're used to. Although she gets pushed into this wishing well, and when she falls through the wishing well, she gets teleported into a completely different dimension of reality. Downtown New York basically pops up in a manhole cover in Times Square. And from there, the rest of the movie is kind of live action, where now you've got this Disney princess that thinks everything is going to be perfect, but living in the real world, and of all places, sort of downtown New York. So her prince comes and gets her. The evil stepmother comes into the real world. The evil stepmother's kind of henchman / the prince's fake friend sidekick, Nathaniel. He comes into the world. A little animated squirrel comes into our world, and chaos ensues. And then towards the end, spoiler alert, she gets poisoned by an apple. So you got that Snow White thing all over again. And the only thing that can bring her back to life is the kiss from a true love. She gets kissed by the prince and doesn't wake up, but then she gets kissed by a normal Joe Schmo, Robert, who is this guy that kind of let her spend the night at his apartment, and they fall in love overnight. He kisses her, she wakes back up, and then they basically do a spouse swap. Robert's real world girlfriend gets with Giselle's cartoon boyfriend, the prince, and then Giselle gets with Robert, and they all live happily after ... That's kind of the shortest version of the movie. Did I miss anything huge in that?
Oh no. I just that ending. I was like, this is weird. I don't know why. Why did it play as weird? That things like that happen in other movies, right? But it just felt weird in this one.
The reason it was weird I mean, a number of reasons. One of that is that he was with his fiance at the time, and they were both keeping up these pretenses as if they were in love. And then this prince, the first time that they meet him in person, his girlfriend, his fiance, she kind of falls in love with him within an hour and just lets Robert like go to her. She actually says like, "Go, Robert, just go to her."
I was like,
There's
that's
no
so
fight,
weird.
there's no squabble. There's no like, "How dare you?" There's none of that like snarky, "Go ahead and kiss her, Robert." Like you would expect some sort of animosity, especially since the whole plot of the movie revolves around Robert sort of dicking around and not proposing to his girlfriend of however many years.
I think it adds a weird flavor that his job is like a divorce lawyer. Like it somehow makes him seem like um a perpetuator of bad relationships or something. I don't know, because he works with people that hate each other most of the time, it seems. Or at least that's how they paint in the movie.
Correct. And he's shocked because Giselle ends up being the antithesis to that everyone she comes in contact with is in a much better mood. And I would also venture to say she's just a walking, talking aphrodisiac. Anyone that she interacts with immediately is like hypersexualized. This happens when she goes to meet Robert at his law firm, and there's this couple that's suing each other, and she just like mentions one thing to them, and then all of a sudden they're in love with each other. And I think that's another reason why this particular movie is a little bit weird, is because this is, I think, the first time that we have a real world, like adult sexualized Disney princess, but she doesn't cast off that weird infantile Disney princess personality. She still acts like this completely ignorant virgin babe in the wild, yet she is being courted by this 40-something-year-old guy. And that's not normally the way that you perceive these Disney movies, I think. It gets a little bit more adult than any other Disney princess has ever got, I would say.
Right. And then I'm adding and having seen, Hard R's with Amy Adams, and I'm like 5 to 10 years later. So it makes it feel stranger. I mean, how old was Patrick Dempsey when he did this? Like, Amy Adams was actually for a
mid-30s, late
starlet.
30s.
Yeah, she's mid-30s. Dempsey, who was known as McDreamy at the time. Okay, yeah, he's like 40, so he's like 5-6 years older. So not the worst. But yeah, a Disney princess you sort of assume is somewhere in the age range of 14 to 18. So I guess it helps that casting Amy Adams makes it clear that this isn't just some bizarre robbing the cradle sort of thing,
It very easily could have been because
with any other Disney princess, it would be, wouldn't it?
Right.
Also,
right,
that would
good.
And so weird putting Giselle with the other Disney princesses, like it's like that South Park where Stan's dad tries to join their boy band or whatever, right? So
yeah,
like one of these people doesn't fit.
She's double the age of any other Disney princess easily.
Yeah. So and I'm not trying to age shame her. I like Amy Adams quite well on screen, but I think doing that also adds to the rom-com energy, because if she was age appropriate, that would just be in the wrong zone energy.
Right. Appropriate being a loaded word in that context.
But again, that's the other thing where I'm mentioning him being a divorce lawyer. It just makes him seem kind of seedy. And at the end of the movie, you assume that's still his job, right? It just because I feel like most movies would have made him like an architect or something, right? That's the standard. Like, oh, he's an architect. He can be slightly artistic, but he's also white collar and a little bit tightly wound or whatever.
Well, and because the divorce lawyer gives a better reason to why he's jaded, that he's not just some random New York schmuck that's angry at the world, that his anger at the world or his skepticism is from real life experience of being in this particular profession, so that when Giselle comes in, she can be the complete opposite of that. She can be, she believes in love at first sight, and I just met my prince an hour ago and we're already in love. And he kind of represents the opposite end where, well, I'm dealing with people that have been married for 10 or 20 years and hate each other now. So I think that they kind of make this perfect Hegelian dialectic in a way, the Disney dialectic.
I did, while this isn't necessarily one of my favorites, I didn't hate it either. It does seem like a notable signpost film for Disney, you know, like how we kind of put that on Snow White and Fantasia, and then later on Fantasia 2000, Toy Story kind of seemed like, you know, kind of sea change movie. So like you said, we're getting a bit of that here, but even with the castle logo, like I'm like, oh, here's the fully modern castle logo right at the beginning. And then we go into the castle, which we don't do in other movies. So,
this one, I think that was trying to immerse you into, okay, this is what it would be like if you were in a cartoon, and this is what it would be like if you went from cartoon to real world and then back again. So I'm surprised. Maybe there is a ride that I just didn't notice, but this would have made a pretty decent ride idea where you start in a cartoon world and burst in almost like a Roger Rabbit style.
Yeah. The Roger Rabbit ride does not do that, unfortunately, though it is fantastic and weird.
It's one of the bloodiest rides.
Yeah, I was about to say, whenever I mention that ride, that comes up again. I did walk by something when I went to Disneyland a few weeks ago, and there was something in the castle. They used to have the terrifying attraction, right, where you'd go see the Black Cauldron dragon in the basement, and kids would cry and stuff, which was fantastic. It looked like it was some royal tour thing now, but I didn't go because I don't know. There were other things to do.
That's a shame. There should be more scary little nooks of Disney.
They still have the scary version of the Snow White ride, which no one else does anymore. They still have the one where it just screams at you for 2 straight minutes and keeps popping out at you and screaming that like 10 different times. So they fixed it in America where it's like the witch doesn't just scream at you. It has music now. The one in Tokyo, it doesn't even have music. It's just the witch screaming and like wind. That's the soundtrack. So
yeah, this movie actually lacks kind of the scary evil stepmother. She does transform into kind of that decrepit old crone look with a big wart on the nose. Like, she does that very briefly, but outside of that, she doesn't really invoke a lot of fear or terror at any point.
Then she shows up that way live action later, which is really weird because at first it's like, oh, they're using their legacy design. Okay, cool. But then when they have to do the live action version of the crone, it's like, okay, that's like the other side of the uncanny valley, you know? I'm used to seeing it as a cartoon.
Horrible.
It wasn't horrible at all. It just felt weird to see.
But done well. If it wasn't done as well, the combination of it being predictable and not done well would have stood out. But it was a success, I guess.
Gives me apple phobia too, because the prefecture I live in is one of the main apple places in Japan. So a poisoned apple, you could eat that.
Well, we'll get to the apples because I think that there is some cool symbolism there. So another, I guess, one of the first other points that I think back up the fact that this is the most hyper sexualized Disney princess in history, at least up to this point, is that even in the beginning of the movie, before she meets her prince, she's sort of assembling a inanimate object version of her perfect prince. And they put the whole thing together. He's got the posture and the head, but they're missing the lips. And as she's trying to describe to the animals, they kind of ask her, when will you know what's right? What makes the perfect lips? And why does he need lips? And she's like, oh, well, because you need to be able to kiss them. And the animals don't really understand this either. So she slowly breaks down. Basically, she explains sex to the birds and the bees, right? She explains
lips are the only things that touch, which sounds like it's like a double entendre. I don't understand,
There's a lot of phrases here that are just for the parents, for sure, which gives it another sort of weird edge to it. She also basically says, before two become one, there is something you must do. And then that's when she mentions that lips are the only thing that touch. But I think that this is sort of foreshadowing, and we do see that this is her infantile Disney princess understanding of the world and how sex works. She thinks you kiss someone and that's it. That's the whole process. But she ends up seeing this in action in the real world and realizes there's a step beyond first base, right? And I wonder, is that the real world? Is so many of the things that happen in this movie make me wonder, just like in Roger Rabbit. I guess my favorite takeaway from when we did Roger Rabbit was that shaving the haircut to bits, and he gets his arm out of the handcuffs as Eddie is like sawing him off, and he slips it back in, and he asks him, "You could have taken your hand out at any time," and Roger Rabbit says, "No, only when it's funny." And the point being is that maybe that is a rule of physics in the Roger Rabbit world, that he couldn't have taken his hand out. He only could take it out when it's funny, because that would just be like gravity in the cartoon world. And maybe kissing somebody in the Disney cartoon world, maybe that does create offspring. Maybe that is how you impregnate someone, is just by kissing them on the lips. That it would make. And there's a few other things that happen in this movie too. For example, right after Giselle jumps down this well, or gets pushed down the well, and comes back up in New York, she sees this big billboard that says, like the Grand Palace or the Royal Palace. It's basically an advertisement for Atlantic City Casino. But she climbs up and she's knocking on the door, expecting to be able to go into this big castle. And I was wondering that too, that because she lives in this two-dimensional world, maybe she doesn't have depth perception. Maybe she doesn't understand three-dimensional reality the same way that everyone else does, which again would kind of lend some credit to, she also believes that kissing impregnates, because that's part of the rules in cartoon world.
That billboard was also insane. I loved it. I'm like, that's from the cartoon world. I mean, that's why she's drawn to it, which is the whole point. But I'm just like, yeah, that doesn't exist. I wish we had billboards like that. I don't know. I guess I've been living in Japan so long where they don't have billboards. So are billboards more awesome than I remember? Because that one was.
They light up now, but I wouldn't say that they're any more awesome than they used to be. They're more distracting. And this billboard was for Palace Casino, and it even had a website that said palacecasinoac.com. The AC stands for Atlantic City. And if you go there, it just redirects you to Disney's homepage. So
Not
good
even
on
the
you,
Enchanted
Disney.
page.
Yeah. Lucky for them, they didn't get squatted out of that and someone turned into an actual, gambling or porn website.
Oh, I was assuming the latter.
No, they got this one. Sometimes they learn their lesson, just not all the time.
Right. And that's with her wildly impractical dress. That was one thing they, just the design thing is every time she changes clothes, it's supposed to be less princessy, I guess, until she's just wearing a normal ass gown by the end of the movie.
Well, she goes to an actual stylist and they style her.
Yeah, but I mean, every time she changes clothes, it's like supposed to be like a little bit less glam, I guess, which is too bad. Let's see. Oh yes, with the songs, we got the cockroaches. Would you let the cockroaches clean your pad if they do it well?
I would.
But magic is cleaning again as well. So
right, that's the number one thing too. That every time someone in a Disney movie enters a new environment or a new reality, they use magic to clean. And I don't know what this is, but it seems like some sort of symbolism denoting that the first step in magic is that novices tend to do very trivial things with it, like cleaning up an apartment and summoning animals to clean up an apartment. And not just cockroaches, but mice and rats and pigeons. All of these things get inside the house and clean up.
Well, I just saw Ratatouille. So I'm saying it right now. Okay. I just saw Ratatouille where the rats are cooking your food. So I guess I've been acclimated to that at least, right? So I'm like, the rats are cleaning. That's fine. They're not even touching my food in this case, so it's fine. But the cockroaches still, Wally did not endear me to the cockroaches. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, if we look hard, we might see George Soros funding and the credits of these movies. Again, just trying to transition people into being more accepting of cockroaches and rats being involved in where you live and where you eat. It's just part of the new normal.
All animals too. You can be happy eating any animal.
Also, she in her song, she talks about cleaning the toilet, and I was wondering too, are there toilets in the Disney cartoon reality? Do they even have bowel movements?
And
or is that something that only happens in the real world? But the fact that she sings about it means that maybe there is such use of toilets in the Disney universe that we just don't see very often.
Yeah, it's like how the Star Trek universe doesn't have toilets. They go into deep space with no toilets. So that's the thing. When she goes through the well or whatever, I guess what physically changes? Like, she had to eat in the cartoon world. I guess we're just gonna have to assume that they do use the toilet in the world because she's not surprised by it or anything, right? She's not like, what's this rumbly in my tumbly or anything, and then they have to tell her to go use the toilet or something.
Maybe. I'm not ready to make a judgment call on this just yet.
That does happen in Star Trek, where Q becomes human and is like, why is my stomach painful or whatever? Because you haven't eaten anything, you idiot.
Yeah, I'm not ready. I think that the jury is still out on whether or not Disney princesses defecate in the cartoon world.
Do not internet search that. I'm sure you will find something. so someone disagrees. I don't know.
There's some artist renditions, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Also, in that scene at the end of when she gets all these vermin to clean the apartment, a pigeon eats one of the cockroaches, and I was wondering too, is that a Disney first? And if it's not at first, it's fairly rare that you actually see the real cycle of life. Like they showed a Lion King, or insinuating they ate bugs, but in this case, we have an anthropomorphic cockroach that just helped. He was just being a friend, and then we see him die live on screen.
Well, when we were talking Ratatouille, we were talking about that one having a little more fear of imminent death, right? Like if the humans see him, he is going to get, exterminated pretty instantly.
So it felt like they were trying to imply too that Giselle, she brought these animals together in a way that they felt safe. The cockroaches felt that they were fine hanging out next to all these pigeons, and everyone was going to get together. But as soon as the song's over, I guess the magic is over, and the real world comes back immediately.
Yeah. I was just wondering if the cockroach is suddenly going free again, or opening that door with all the rats in Ratatouille would be worse. What's worse coming at you? A swarm of cockroaches or a swarm of rats?
I would assume rats.
Yeah, because you can't just squash the rats if you had to,
Right. And I mean, they can bite a lot harder.
Right. But yeah, okay. So there's some, like, I guess those were CGI cockroaches and stuff, and I didn't think about it. So I guess that was some good effects in that scene, kind of like.
Yeah, it didn't stand out as being horrible. And a scene that comes pretty much right after that is when we see that Nathaniel, who is, again, he kind of acts as the sidekick to the prince, but secretly he's got a crush on the evil stepmother / wicked witch kind of archetype. So he plays this dual role character, sidekick for the good guy and the bad guy in a way. And he goes and sees he's in a kitchen somewhere in New York, and the stepmother appears in this big vat of soup, I guess it was. And in that scene is all CG too, because she conjures up these poison apples that he has to feed her. She makes 3 of these apples. And I was wondering, in that scene, since this happened in a commercial kitchen in the middle of New York City that gets lots of traffic, is that soup poison now because they put poison apples in the soup? And we don't see that they dispose of that soup. So I just assume that everyone that got the soup at that restaurant that day all dies.
Headlines the next day, yeah. They'll call it food poisoning, of course, but they don't know about the magic.
They don't know it was magic food poisoning.
Right. They'll just assume it was salmonella or something, whatever you get in the norovirus, that sort of thing. Let's dive down one of your rabbit holes there. I am looking through snarky notes, and I've gotten through a lot of them already. So
okay, mine are interwoven, so I got a snarky note coming up first. But one of the first things Giselle does when she enters this new real world reality is she has to touch a black person's hair. And I don't know what it is about like white people that have never left their small town, and I guess this Amy Adams included in this, but they just feel this need to touch black people's hair, and that's represented well in this movie. It's one of the first things that she does as soon as she gets to experience 3D reality. That's the very next thing she wants to know about this world.
Yeah, I grew up in Atlanta, so I guess that impulse never came across me.
And it shouldn't. I don't understand
No,
the
it shouldn't.
impulse at all. I don't get it. I wish I did. When I was in the military and boot camp, I saw I saw people getting into fights over this more than just 2 or 3 times because there was people that had never been away from their white hick town that just had the need to touch black people's hair. So I don't know. I wish I understood what the draw was. I don't like touching people's hair, period, of any kind, of any ethnicity. I'm kind of like Nikola Tesla in that way. It's kind of gross, but it's not gross to Amy Adams and Giselle, and it was written into this movie, and I guess a major plot point in a way, because that person ends up being on the news, and it leads the prince back to her, so it becomes like this memorable thing. Another one too is that
she wouldn't stand that much in New York City, though, right?
I guess not. I guess not. Although most people don't do, I don't think they do that in public in New York City. One other interesting thing about Giselle is that everyone else that goes through this portal and enters the real world, they apparently lose their ability to talk to animals. The prince they show is able to talk to this squirrel. Even Nathaniel can talk to the squirrel when they're in the cartoon world. And as soon as they get into the real world, they can no longer communicate with nature, except for Giselle. For some reason, Giselle, even when the little chipmunk is making all these weird noises where you clearly can tell that they're not both talking the same language, she knows what he's saying. Although the chipmunk knows what all of the humans are saying, even though he also teleported from cartoon world to real world, he understands just a regular New Yorker walking around and talking. He gets everything they're saying, and he understands exactly what their intentions are, which is kind of a weird thing. This is a strange inversion. I don't think we've seen this particular thing happen in a Disney movie before, where all humans cease the ability to commune with nature, but nature can understand all of us.
By the way, the Pip the squirrel in the real world is voiced by the film's director, Kevin Lima, which is kind of fun, which means he's just making squeaky noises.
And not to nitpick, but to nitpick, I think it is a chipmunk.
Oh, chipmunk? Yeah, sure. Okay. Oh, yeah. Why am I saying squirrel?
Well, because they confuse it for a squirrel a couple times in the movie as well. And I said squirrel a couple times too, but yeah, it's a chipmunk. Pip is a chipmunk.
Yeah, I guess it's I do the podcast where we're talking about Planet of the Apes, and we just keep calling them monkeys, which is that's offensive to
right.
to evolved
great apes.
Chimpanzee. Yeah. They're not monkeys, but it's just so fun to say it.
So here's one of the biggest plot points that I think needed some armor, or maybe they just left it without any armor. But since this Pip the chipmunk is the only thing that can talk to both sides and understands what's going on, Nathaniel quickly realizes that Pip is going to screw up everything. Pip is trying to prevent Giselle from eating one of these poison apples, and so then Nathaniel starts going after the chipmunk. But why doesn't Nathaniel just kill the damn chipmunk? I know there's a couple places where he tries to. He like throws him into a pizza oven and he gets away. But there's more than a couple times when Nathaniel has Pip in compromising situations, and he could just have killed him, and that would have eliminated the entire sort of linchpin in Giselle getting all this crucial information from Pip.
Well, Pip gets crucified eventually, right?
He does, yeah. He does get crucified.
Jesus would have been just like Pip and run around with the cross on for a while, which that was weird. I mean, they know what they're doing when they do that. That the symbology is just obvious to anyone in the West.
There's a scene as soon as they start going through like Central Park, and they're no longer in Times Square here. And I think this is all Central Park. And as they're walking around, they run into every different cultural group you could imagine, even ones that I think don't even have strong representation in New York. They're all here. So as they're walking, they run into a group of Jamaicans, and they're playing like steel drums, and they got dreads. Then they run into a group of guys wearing 18th century pompadours because they're advertising this ball, this kings and queens kind of ball going on. Then they run into a bunch of Cubans. Then they run into a bunch of Mexicans with sombreros playing, mariachi music. Then they run into a bunch of Bavarians that, by the way, are in the middle of a maypole celebration. They're all wearing the traditional Bavarian garb with the like the flowers on that. and they've got the little. I mean, it's basically midsummer in the middle of Central Park, and then they run into a bunch of rollerbladers. Which, man, this had to be on the very, very tail end of the rollerblading culture, right? 2007 feels like a little like we're already getting phased out. And then we run into the New York construction worker crowd. But I was just wondering, this almost felt like Epcot. Like this was them just going through the Epcot park into each different town if there was, a midsummer area of Epcot, which there should be.
Do they do? I could see them doing that sort of thing in the Norway Pavilion. Maybe they do get that.
And then sacrifice them to Chernobog. It would all kind of work in pretty well.
Yeah, that's the evening show, isn't it? They sacrifice people with Chernobog in the lagoon, right? I think that's what it is.
Also, the New York construction workers in this movie are incredibly understanding and respectful compared to everything we've ever been taught. Both if you've ever been to New York or just watching movies about construction workers in New York, they are very courteous and very respectful of everybody.
Of course.
Yeah, which they could have leaned into that a little bit more, but I get it.
Come on, give me a smile. That's what we should have gotten, I guess. No, apparently the production delays for a live action part were mostly weather because they're doing that number in Central Park and they have to have the right lighting. So if it's cloudy or rainy, they're screwed. Construction was a big problem. And then apparently this is the height of Patrick Dempsey's fame because of Grey's Anatomy. So there were a lot of McDreamy fans. He was McDreamy at the time, I guess, was his nickname.
See, that's so interesting because I had no idea that he was in that role. I just know him as the guy that kidnapped and butchered his own kid in the new Dexter series. That is the closest reference I had to him.
Well, I guess that's why they cast him, because it's like, hey, we got McDreamy doing that. How fun is that, right? that could be the thing. How long is Grey's Anatomy? I've never watched Grey's Anatomy, but hasn't it been on the air for like 6,000 years or something at this point?
Yeah, I feel like that was around clearly in the early 2000s if he got his fame from that.
Yeah. Okay, 2005 to 2015, and then one season 2020 to 21. So 10 seasons. That's not completely unreasonable. For some reason, I thought that was one of those shows that went on for like 20 plus seasons, like The Simpsons is still on the air and everyone sounds old now, I guess, is how that works. I haven't seen a recent Simpsons, so yeah, everyone sounds like Mr. Burns now. And Mr. Burns sounds even older. That's what I would assume, because those actors are getting up there in the years.
Yeah, that Mr. Burns. Since you brought up Mr. Burns, that's Harry Shearer, who was one of the few people in The Simpsons that is documented as to having been to Bohemian Grove. By the way, so that's one of my favorite tidbits. Is when people are like, "How does the Simpsons predict the future?" Well, it's kind of easy to predict the future if you go to Bohemian Grove to one of the lakeside talks, and they say, hey, here's what's going to happen in the next 5 years. You get an insight.
Harry Shearer, famously chill guy as well. So,
have you ever heard of the movie Teddy Bear's Picnic? It's a movie by Harry Shearer. So after Alex Jones and John Ronson snuck into Bohemian Grove and they put out that documentary on VHS, I think what was that, 96 or 97?
Oh, was it that early? Okay.
I think it was pre 9/11, maybe not, but yeah, Alex Jones and John Ronson sneak into Bohemian Grove, and shortly afterwards, Harry Shearer puts out a movie called Teddy Bear's Picnic, and it's all about Bohemian Grove and these two journalists that sneak in and try and crash the party. But if you know anything about Bohemian Grove, you know that without a doubt, every single bit of that movie is entirely about Bohemian Grove, and it's got a lot of inside jokes that only if you were a Bohemian Grove member or absolute obsessed conspiracy theorist like me that you would get some of these jokes. For example, he pokes at how the band and the choreographers and the stage lighting guys spend all this time, choreographing an entire Grove play, but then when the head honchos come in to actually reenact, they don't care. They don't hit their marks. They don't wait for the lighting and stuff. But there's all this weird behind the scenes Bohemian Grove shop talk that comes out in this. So anyways, there's your Simpsons Bohemian Grove factoid for the day.
Do the journalists in the movie get Wicker Man or something?
I I'll let you decide. I don't want to spoil that movie because that's not the one we're reviewing right now.
No, okay. Don't want to spoil that for the Enchanted cast.
It kind of is what Bohemian Grove is. It's a Wicker Man ritual. So
right, that's what I'm asking. Enchanted, of course, we can spoil as much as we want to. I guess we already have when we're getting down to it. So,
well, I guess this is the most on the nose observation of this entire movie. So after the prince comes through and he's in the real world, he gets into this hotel room where, this is like his home base. And as soon as he gets into the hotel room, he sees the television and he correctly calls it the Black Mirror. And he calls it a magic mirror. And he starts consulting this magic mirror. And wouldn't you know, as he's scrolling through and clicking, he ends up seeing this news report. So he's like, just tell me where is she? Where is Giselle? And then bam, it immediately says this lady was seen at this particular intersection, which actually it's a very specific place that I'll mention. But he's seeing this. And I just figured that's what we usually mention, is that how TVs and cell phones, like these are these black scrying mirrors and magic mirrors. And they outright say it. Like the character in the Disney movie rightfully calls it a black mirror.
Magic mirror, but same idea.
Potato, yeah.
That scene, I was like sitting there thinking Videodrome for children, But hey, I mean, I guess that's Marshall McLuhan theory at work. So when the TV interacts with you that way, or you interact with the TV or whatever.
Well, and after that happens, he puts it onto a soap opera. And he immediately gets engrossed with that soap opera. And I just felt, too, because it was all part of that scene and he had just called it a magic mirror, that this is the insidious part of TV. This is what makes TV evil, is that people end up relating to these fake scripted storylines and feeling the emotions as if they're in these fake scripted scenarios that don't actually happen in that way. And here's the prince immediately, like he just sucked into it day one. And I kind of feel that would definitely make him evil. He doesn't turn evil in this movie necessarily. He's just kind of ignorant and not for this world. But if you were to sit him down and just let him watch soap operas for a month, I almost feel that he becomes a supervillain.
Yeah, probably in a few years, Prince Edward and Nancy Tremaine will need the services of one Robert Phillip, attorney at law.
And in that same exact scene where the prince discovers the TV or the magic mirror, this is where Nathaniel catches Pip the Chipmunk. And so here's one of those situations when he could have just killed Pip and then the movie would have played out completely differently. But instead of killing Pip, he kind of crucifies him by clipping him to a hanger in the closet. But it's very much a crucifixion. Yeah,
and that's got to be one of the more bizarre images I've gotten out of a Disney movie.
That was the screenshot that I'm probably going to use for the thumbnail. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, that is because I don't know. I feel like they're usually a little more suave with that sort of thing, and here not at all. I think anyone would read it that way. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. And another weird thing about Pip the Chipmunk, and I don't know how much to look into this, but the fact that he's the only one that can understand everyone and he knows the lay of the land, and he also is not ignorant. Like he understands danger and he understands what buses are and what poison and all of these things that no one else seems to know, that just came from this fictional reality. But even before we transition into the real world, Pip the Chipmunk has this New Yorker construction worker attitude. He even has that like New York slang where he's got that like, hey, I'm walking here kind of attitude to him, right? Even before we get into New York, which makes me wonder, did he originally come from Central Park? He knows the real world and then he escaped into the cartoon world. So now that when he goes back, this is why he understands everything and he doesn't have to get caught up to speed, because otherwise this is just another unexplained, plot point where why is Pip so damn hip?
And then in the sequel, I believe he can talk for whatever reason. I don't know if that's a plot point to get to later, or they forgot, or I'm sure they addressed that, but we'll talk about that.
He even says before they get to the real world, while they're still in the cartoon world, Pip even says something like, "Hey, what are we, garbage?" Like he kind of throws this out there as if he's offended that he's not getting the respect he deserves in even the cartoon part of this movie. So I don't know. It's interesting enough to point out, but I don't know how else to look into that deeper.
The animals are the archons of the cartoon world, keeping the cartoon humans in place, so they have more knowledge about everything.
I mean, that's kind of his role in this movie. That's exactly what he does. Is he's here to guide the humans and make sure all of the humans kind of act within their own roles, but he gets to live outside of those rules.
No, I was, when I say those sorts of things, it's half joking, right? So, but then Susan Sarandon's witch. What is she in that makeup? Is she the she's not an animal, so she's a kind of she becomes an animal.
She's a dragon, yeah.
She is a dragon, so I guess she can still count as an animal. Okay, there we go. Problem solved. So she would be the king of the archons, queen of the archons.
Okay, I'm gonna keep this rant to very short, but this movie again, it reminds me of this thing that why is it okay for Disney to do caricatures of Italians? Why are Italians allowed to have caricatures of them over the top? They've got the same accent. They're always spinning a pizza. They've always got the mustache. They're always portly. They have a very specific superficial aesthetic when you stereotype an Italian, but it almost feels that Disney does not feel the same liberty to extend that to every other culture. So I don't know. I always stand, and I don't just mean like a normal caricature. I mean like a cartoonish caricature, and I'm meaning that Nathaniel at some point dresses up as if he owns this Italian restaurant, and even his real world sort of persona, he looks like Joe or Tony from Lady and the Tramp. Like it's a dead ringer. He could have played the live action version of Joe or Tony, but here he is in the real world acting like the stereotypical Italian pizza vendor.
Yeah, I guess Ratatouille didn't really double down into like French stereotypes. It didn't get that honk on us. Mostly.
Yeah, you don't
except
hear
for
the
it's just the short chef. I think that's the closest they got in that movie.
Yeah, but even the short chef looks like he might be like outside of France. He looks like his family might have immigrated to France.
He might be Italian.
He might have been Italian, yeah.
and again, he'd be the most stereotypy. That's one where I guess we're cool with it for some reason.
For now, yeah, until someone complains enough.
Yeah. I mean, getting back to The Simpsons, you don't get a poo anymore, do you? Although I guess we don't know because we haven't watched it recently.
we didn't realize what we had until it got taken from us.
It could be great. I don't know. Maybe one thing that makes this movie a little bit hard to talk about in the way we talk about movies is it is consistently kind of pointing at itself, which most of these movies do not do. It's not that normal for a Disney movie to point at itself.
Yeah, it's a very self-aware movie, which lends into the Girlboss stuff towards the end, even though we've seen that already happening in just the overall storylines, but in this one, it's pronounced so much more. And before we move on to the rest of the movie, in this one restaurant scene too, those apples. So there's 3 apples, which maybe is symbolic in its own right, with the 3 different knocks and the 3 that it's kind of like the rule of 3s. But they also each take a different form. So the evil stepmother provides these 3 poison apples, and Nathaniel is essentially supposed to just give one of these apples to Giselle, and that'll knock her out so they can bring her back to the cartoon world, or so that she's just out of the picture. I guess she just dies. The first apple is a full apple, the entire thing, but it gets coated in caramel. So here we've got a candied apple. The second one is a sliced apple, and this one is in a martini. And then the last apple, which Giselle ends up eating at the end, is just a full, regular old apple, no treatment whatsoever. And it almost felt like they were each represented a different vice or a different sort of fatality. Like the first one was candy, the second one was alcohol, and the third one was a literal escapism, because Giselle's told if you bite in this apple, then you get to erase all your memories and everything can go back to the way it was. So it's almost like candy, alcohol, and drugs. These are the 3 different apples. These are the 3 poisons that can affect you in the real world. So that was, maybe I'm going too deep into that one, but it really felt like each of those represented a very different specific function in this new real world.
So she fails the third temptation.
Yeah, she does. She doesn't care about the candy apple, which she throws, and it ends up in some biker's helmet, and it's like coated in hydrochloric or like sulfuric acid or something, because it just melts its way through. I mean, like, that guy could have died, right? That could have eaten a hole through his head and into his brain. That's sort of the implication on that original poison apple.
And he rides his motorcycle into the sidewalk, takes out a few more people. I mean, that could be a disaster of apples.
There's another, just a random tangent. I won't take too long on this one, but the power of AI is starting to sort of surprise me, in that there was that scene when we're in the Italian restaurant. I saw these posters on the wall in the background, and just doing random deep dive stuff, I was like, I wonder if those posters are real, and if they are real, what are those posters in the background? Is there something else that I can glean from all this? And I just took a screenshot of a blurry, motion blur kind of screen as the camera was panning, and you got this tiny little glimpse of a poster on the wall in the back of this Italian restaurant. And I plugged it in the chat GPT, and I just said, hey, what poster is this? And it immediately told me exactly what it was. And it was a real poster. It was from Air France. It was created in 1963 by a French artist named Guy Georget. And it told you exactly who used it, when it was published, everything. And then there was another poster in that same scene that had even worse screenshot, and that was a San Pellegrino advertisement from 1921, specifically published between May and October. So that just blew my mind that I was able to do those 2 particular movie posters. Didn't necessarily lead me on any other tangents or like symbols, but there's been so many times when we're watching these movies, and I'm like, man, I wish I knew what that was, but it went by so fast. Like, what am I supposed to do? Now, I mean, we can go into these tangents almost, for like infinite different rabbit holes. So anyways, expect more tangents coming up because of how easy it is to sort of look into this stuff now.
Of course, there's also the occasional dumbness of AI, whereas on Zoom for a podcast a few days ago, and it starts forcing the AI tips to you. And the first one that comes up is have a baking competition. What, on Zoom? We're supposed to, this cake is good. I promise you, this cake's better than your cake. You just have to trust me on that. So I was like, that's a stupid suggestion, Zoom.
I think this also represents, though, like what AI is good for. And that's if here's an actual objective thing, and I want you to tell me what that thing is and where it came from. That's a little bit harder to, I mean, it can lie, but you can fact check it pretty quickly to know if that's a lie. So these are examples of things that have a one single right objective answer that it can't really BS itself out of.
Yeah, needle in a haystack sort of thing. I mean, search engines do that to a certain extent, but what you're talking about, I guess, gives you the full dossier with one screenshot. So
I'm excited for the implications that it has on future Occult Disney, like watch throughs, especially if we get into any more live action stuff.
There's a couple that will have some live action in there. So,
in that scene, the last thing that happens in that pizza restaurant scene is that Pip is trying to prevent Giselle from eating or drinking this apple martini that's now got the poison. This is try number 2 by Nathaniel to take her out. But Pip is also just trying to communicate to her in general, and it works. Like, she is able to talk to him, but Nathaniel sees this happening, throws a pizza on top of Pip the chipmunk, and then takes that pizza and throws it into an oven. And the oven's kind of gnarly looking. It's got this, it's basically Vulcan. It's like a Vulcan god that is the pizza oven, but he throws the pizza into the mouth of this thing, and everyone in the restaurant stands up and claps and cheers. And I was just, again, is this a normal reaction? You're in a restaurant with your crowded restaurant, packed. Everyone is sitting down. Someone's like, oh my God, there's a chipmunk on my pizza. And then the owner comes out and takes that chipmunk and the pizza and throws it into the oven, thereby killing it and cooking it in the same oven that everyone's food is coming out of. Yet everyone stands up and claps and cheers. I didn't get that. Is this an alternate reality? Are they all sadists? Are they all fine with this?
They got the wrong mushrooms on their pizza that day. That's what happened. Or the right ones.
I guess, or this is positing us as being like this world of all supervillains, that after you get pushed down the well, we're even worse than the evil stepmother just by default in this reality.
We champion and cheer at the destruction of animals. Yeah.
Right. And we can't even commune with them. Like, we got no idea how to even talk with nature. So it almost feels that this is poking fun at humans and almost, putting us into a lower level than cartoon characters.
One thing that's weird with this movie is it's like what we remember coming out of it, right? We had a delay on recording, so I watched the second half of the movie a few days after the first half, and I was like, what happened? And I went, scrubbing through, oh yeah, I remember this, but it didn't stick. The cartoon part stuck, right? Like, I remember that quite well. And the rest of the movie just kind of went in, one eye and out the other, more or less.
This is why sometimes for this show, I have to watch these movies 2, sometimes 3 times, because inevitably my mind will just wander. And then it's like, pay attention. This is work. This is not just something on in the background. So I go back through, and sometimes that same thing happens where on the second watch, I'm like, I don't remember any of these scenes.
Well, when I went scrubbing through, I was like, oh, I do remember the scenes. They didn't stick at all, Like, when I see it, when I look at my notes and stuff, I'm like, it comes back, but I like have trouble. Like, to me, she comes to the real world, the castle billboard. I was like, is that where I'm starting? And I'd actually watched like 30 minutes more of the movie. And when I looked back, I remembered watching those 30 minutes, but like none of it stuck, So
well, for a Disney movie in particular too, this movie lacks a lot of those over the top images, like those visual milestones that you're used to setting the pace on the regular movie. This one pretty much all happens in the real world, and the craziest thing that happens is pigeons and cockroaches swarm an apartment, and then a lady turns into a dragon. And aside from that, the rest of this is kind of just standard fare New York love story.
Yeah, and I guess the first 10 minutes is like so overloaded with those visual signifiers, It's like, maybe it's a little bit like the NPL thing where the dragon at the end sears in your brain, the segment at the beginning sears in your brain, and then the middle you kind of like you forget about a bit.
Well, that's where they stuff all the real programming at.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. So I'm like, I feel like I got NPL'd and I missed something.
NLP'd, yeah, same.
And yes, NLP, and being a bit dyslexic there.
So after Nathaniel throws the chipmunk, allegedly or presumably throws the chipmunk into the pizza oven, everyone thinks it dies. It doesn't actually die. It gets away. And you know this almost immediately because this is when the prince turns on the TV and sees that Giselle's there and where she's at. And this is the news report. So this, again, in my mind, it's Disney showing how the real world is the villain. It's the antithesis of this Disney world where everyone loves animals, because the news report starts out and they're talking about that they searched the pizza oven and they did not find any animal remains. So the animal is out there somewhere. And then the ticker at the bottom of the news report says rodent rage on the rise. So it's kind of like they immediately turn this chipmunk into a villain, that the entire city is now concerned about this chipmunk and they're all basically want to kill this chipmunk. So it shows that the animals are the good guys in this movie and all of the humans are sort of the bad guys. At least that was the implication I got from that particular scene.
You are the villain. If you want to be a good guy, visit the Magic Kingdom.
And then as the prince is watching this news report and he's like, Magic Mirror, please, I beg of you, just tell me where she is. And then the news reporter immediately says 116th and Broadway. And 116th and Broadway is actually where the building that they show Robert living in, that's the real building at that real location, which also happens to be right where Columbia University is at. And I don't know if that means anything. I don't think any of people involved in this project went to Columbia, but that just happens to be where they locate Robert.
Right. I lost my thought. Sorry.
So another scene here is that when Giselle is staying with Robert, because basically him and his daughter just find Giselle in the middle of New York, climbing on top of this billboard trying to enter a castle, and the daughter talks him into like, "Oh, daddy, can't we bring her home or whatever?" He's like, "Okay, she can come in and use the phone." And then she falls asleep on the couch, and it's like, "Okay, she can spend the night, but she's got to go out in the morning." You know, it turns into like they just found a stray cat essentially. And through this, one of those nights, Giselle ends up reading a story or telling a story to Robert's daughter, and she's telling her the Red Riding Hood story. And we just catch the very, very tail end of it. And the daughter's like, "I don't remember that version." And Amy Adams, or rather Giselle, she basically says, "Well, that's because Red tells it differently." And this is also one of those self-aware comments on Disney that, yeah, we kind of change the story up depending on who's telling it and who the audience is. And we're aware that we're doing that because in the original Red Riding Hood story, she almost dies. I think she gets saved by an axeman in the Grimm Fairy Tales version. And then there's another version where Little Red Riding Hood gets eaten by the wolf and there's no happy ending and no one saves them. So I don't know. I thought that was just there's not a lot of other Disney movies when they are acknowledging the fact that they have a distorted version of the original stories.
And that this movie, the original script was a raunchy comedy. So,
Right.
that meta to the level of the production of the film. Although, you wonder if that's where someone's like, "Hey, I'm being smart, I'm putting that in," if it subconsciously ends up in there, or if it is just a weird coincidence. I guess that's a fascinating thing about that kind of thing.
Here's an interesting tidbit that I did not know until I started looking at the Disney Red Riding Hood stuff. Because I was wondering, has Disney ever done a full-fledged Red Riding Hood movie? And the answer is no. That there was the Big Bad Wolf from Silly Symphony.
Three Little Pigs. That's what I thought of immediately. It's like, who's afraid of the Big Bad Wolf? Those are the pigs. The pigs are afraid of the Big Bad Wolf.
But also that's Silly Symphonies, which isn't really a feature-length Disney movie. That one's from 1934, and this one is the Three Little Pigs, and they help Little Red Riding Hood escape from the wolf. But this is a mixture of the Three Little Pigs and Red Riding Hood into one. But there was a abandoned Little Red Riding Hood film that Walt Disney tried putting together in the 30s, but he was never able to fully make it. And basically, there's production notes that show that the Little Red Riding Hood movie got scrapped in favor of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So he was actually working on Little Red Riding Hood before Snow White ever came out. So that was kind of interesting. And I even found an original clip of this. But I guess that there was some sort of a copyright issue because at this point in the early 1900s, the actual story Red Riding Hood was still under copyright protection from the Grimm Fairy Tale publication of this. So Walt wasn't allowed to do the wolf and like Little Red Riding Hood. So his version of Little Red Riding Hood was a girl driving around in her car and like a dapper looking villain guy with a top hat and a monocle also driving around in a car and then like following her. And then someone gets into a plane and there's like a plane drive by with like the Gatling gun shooting off the plane. Like it has nothing to do with anything you would expect from Little Red Riding Hood. But the other interesting part of this is that dapper guy with the top hat and the monocle is technically the very first Disney villain that ever makes the screen in all of Disney history. And I don't even think he has a name. And I don't think I even knew that guy existed.
Okay. Mickey Mouse in the black and white ones has an antagonist. I forget. Stinky Pete, is that his name? No, Stinky Pete is Toy Story. Anyway, but I guess he's not as villainous, I guess is the point. He's just
right. But this one, at least on the wiki page, this denotes that this particular Little Red Riding Hood short was was Walt Disney's very first attempt at storytelling in animated film. So it would predate even Steamboat Willie.
Oh, okay. There we go. Oh, I thought we were talking late 30s. We're talking 20s there. Okay, yeah,
This
sure.
is 1920s because it got scrapped in the 30s in favor of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But yeah, this was the first thing that he ever put onto animated film of any kind. So yeah, there's a fun little Disney factoid that I didn't even know before we watched this.
Of course, now it's so public domain. What do we get? Like 10 years ago, there were multiple gritty reboots of like Hansel and Gretel, Snow White, and Little Red Riding Hood. Didn't they all get gritty live action versions?
Well, one of those was Disney's. Disney had Into the Woods in 2014, which was live action. Walt Disney. This is one that had Johnny Depp in it too.
Okay, so they got to see. I know that title, but that's one. Yeah, I even forgot about that because I didn't watch these. You know, they didn't look interesting for one thing, so that probably kept me away.
And here's some of the reasons too. If you're like me, and I was wondering why hasn't Disney done a Red Riding Hood aside from the fact that it was still under copyright in the 1920s, but I mean 100 years have gone by. So some of those reasons are that Little Red Riding Hood, unlike the Disney princesses, where even if they're 14, like Beauty and the Beast, all of those Disney princesses are essentially reflections of coming into puberty and that they're now on the market, and that's why they're getting hooked up with the prince. There's probably some dowry going on. Like there's an actual reason for that. Little Red Riding Hood is like a little girl, not even close to Disney princess age, so off limits even for Disney princess metrics. But also there's really no love story. There's no sort of like male counterpart in Little Red Riding Hood, unless you count the Woodsman. But now you've got like a Beauty and the Beast weird thing going on. Also, Red Riding Hood is way darker than almost any other Disney property. Maybe the Little Mermaid, because the Little Mermaid, they were gonna kill John Smith or whatever the hell his name was. They were actually gonna kill him, but they don't, because that was the John Christian Andersen version of it. The other thing too is that the animal is a bad guy in Little Red Riding Hood, right? And if you look at most Disney movies, if it's nature versus man, nature is pretty much always the good guy. So I don't know how you would retell an animated Disney version of Red Riding Hood, because they would have to make the wolf the good guy somehow and Little Red Riding Hood the bad guy. That's the formula now for Disney.
With humans, because you got the Lion King, so you got Scar in there, but there are no humans, so what are you going to do?
Right. What they would have to do is they would have to make Little Red Riding Hood the animal, like now Red is a chipmunk or a rabbit, and then the wolf would have to be the human. Yeah, that's the way that
that's what they did with Robin Hood, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's exactly how they did that.
They're all animals now, so it's fine.
What else? I got a few other notes here.
Roll for it.
Another example that the two different realities between cartoon and New York or in the real world share different physics is that the prince, he encounters a revolving door and he doesn't understand how the revolving door works. He goes through it and he walks all the way around. And he comes right back out the way that he came in because he doesn't understand this concept. Maybe, again, this is the first time that he's been in 3D space. He doesn't understand the concept of depth because it doesn't exist in this cartoon world. The same way that when Giselle climbs up that billboard, she expects to be able to walk through the door of this clearly painted palace on the front of this billboard, because they're just experiencing three-dimensional reality for the first time.
But Pip has no problem.
Yeah, Pip can traverse, because again, I think Pip came from New York. I think that he originally started in Central Park, found the portal that was in a sewer plate in Times Square, and then he's been hanging out in like the Disney universe ever since then. He probably has crimes. He's probably got murders.
He murdered a few rats. Yeah. You said you had a few extra notes there.
Yeah. One of the funny adult jokes that are in this is that Prince Charming, he sees on TV that she's at 116th and whatever the cross street was. And he basically just starts knocking on every single door in the apartments. The very first door that he knocks on, this lady opens up the door and she's got like 5 kids. It's only 3, but there's like, there's a room full of kids, babies crying. There's like a kid there that's like playing with a broken toy or something. And she just looks him up and down and basically says, "You're late." like, like she's already been knocked up and left and like jaded on the whole thing that, if that was supposed to be her Prince Charming. So I just thought that was hilarious when she answers that and she's like, "You're late."
I could have had at least 10 more little vignette jokes if they wanted. Whole montage of them. Who knows who's behind these doors, right? That he's knocking on.
There's a scene when Giselle is talking to Robert and she gets angry for the first time. And the implication here is that Disney princess, or maybe everybody in the Disney universe, doesn't understand what the emotion anger is. It just doesn't exist for any of the good guys. I assume that bad guys in the Disney universe are always angry, so they know what it feels like. But first she gets angry, and then she realizes that she's angry, and then she says she's delighted by it because it's a new emotion. So even though she's angry, she's happy that she's angry. I feel like there's probably a German word that represents that particular phenomenon that I just haven't heard before, but like the first time you get so angry that you're delighted by how angry you are, that feels like a German trait.
For another Star Trek reference, when they have the android Data gets his emotion chip and drinks something, he's like, or eats something or whatever. It's like, "I hate this. Give me more." He's so happy that he hates it. another one that we need the German word for. Yeah.
And then in that same scene, as she's angry, she goes and like grabs Robert on the chest or something. Like she goes to grab him, and I guess he's wearing like a bathrobe that's like, half open. And as she grabs him, her hand goes onto his chest and she starts like stroking his chest hair, which I guess in 2007, he's like this Grey Anatomy heartthrob kind of guy. So it leads more into that. But then she's also like, "Oh, now I feel something else." And then they almost have this like kissing moment, but it kind of gets broken up. Because like she's in the middle of something, but there's this moment. And you realize that, or she realizes there is something more than just that kiss. Either that, or she realizes, I almost just kissed this guy. And I guess in her mind, it was like, man, I almost just got pregnant right then.
Okay, my note is, did she just get horny? So I was taking it the first way, not the second. But
she definitely got horny, and she realized that, and it only happened after she got angry first. Right. So it was like the love and the anger led directly to that horniness, but they both stopped before the kiss. And I just wondered, did she stop because that's the Disney cartoon equivalent of pulling out? It's like you're about to kiss and then you don't.
Yeah. I'm just remembering, actually, Disney uses her again. It's not on our list, but she shows up in the live action Muppets a year or two later. So they did draw this line out with her a little longer before, I guess, booting her from
before starts dropping hard R's left and right.
Yeah, before she kind of gets out of the Disney scene there.
And then eventually the prince, I guess, in the background as we're watching everything else unfold, he's still knocking on doors, and he eventually comes to the right door. He knocks on theirs and he comes into the apartment and he's singing. He's doing like the Disney Prince song, and he's like jumping up on the couch and like dancing around, almost knocking things over. And now you can see that she's concerned that he's going to knock some stuff over in this 3-dimensional space that they're both just getting used to. And then he stops and he stares at her and he's like, "You're not singing." And then she realizes it too, that, "Oh my God, I'm not singing." She goes, "I'm thinking." And then he looks at her and he's like, "Thinking?" Like he doesn't know what thinking is. And I think this is one of the first big markers that this is kind of Girlboss territory, where even when the prince enters this real world, he never wises up. He just remains a complete idiot the entire time throughout this movie. He never wisens up. He never gets any sort of real life experience from it because, again, he's this prince and he just expects everything that falls in place for him, and including not having to think.
And it does. He has.
It does work out very well for him.
So him being a dullard works fine.
And then she suggests going on a date, which is this foreign concept, which I think this is kind of a funny self-aware Disney joke where it's like, yeah, what do you mean you don't just meet someone and then within an hour you've fallen in love and then the next you're getting married, and like that's just how everything works. There is no backup option. There is no second in command. Although Beauty and the Beast, there is Gaston, and Gaston kind of presents himself as like the first choice or the backup choice. But in most Disney movies, there is no playing the field. There are no fish in the sea. There's just the one fish that you catch, and then you better just hope that it was love at first sight on that first one, because there's no redos.
I don't remember if we talked about it during Fantasia 2000, but Michael Eisner's idea for the pomp and circumstance thing was going to be the procession of all the Disney prince and princesses presenting their children, which sounds really creepy for some reason. Especially, yeah, Snow White and Prince Charming. It's like, because they'd have to show Snow White as is from the movie, right? You can't really age them up or anything, which maybe, and then the kid would have to be at least like 6 or something. They'd have to be standing, I think. So, yeah, there's all sorts of creepy in that segment. Glad it didn't happen. Bad idea, Eisner.
This movie also shows 3D chipmunk poop. I feel like that's worth pointing out, that we see Pip the Chipmunk bend over, squat and strain, and you see a big chunk of chipmunk poop fly out of his butt and then onto the ground. Like they don't cut any of it out.
Yeah. Well,
first, I think that is the first time that I think we see a fully uncensored defecation scene in a Disney cartoon.
Yeah, I guess we haven't. Yeah, you would. Yeah, Ratatouille didn't have rat shit, did it? So
nope. This is one of the only Disney movies at all that I think shows poop. Period.
I don't know if this has any influence. The second produced by credit is Barry Sonnenfeld, and that could have just meant he backed up with some money or something. But he did Men in Black and Addams Family, so I wonder if that's a bit of that kind of vibe sneaking into this movie. But I don't know how hands-on or off he was with this one. It's certainly after he kind of stopped directing stuff, because he kept making stuff like this.
Very hands-on with the 3D poop.
Yeah.
there was another theory that I was sort of developing as I was watching this movie, maybe on the second viewing, but that you can see Giselle start off as this sort of like babe in Toyland in a way, right? Like completely ignorant, infantile, and then she gets jaded, or at least becomes more realistic over the course of this movie. But the people that she interacts with, they become a little bit, I mean, the namesake of the movie, Enchanted. So everyone that she comes in contact with becomes enchanted in some way. They have some new sort of folly with life. They take themselves less seriously, or they become happier, more jovial. And I wonder, is this a zero-sum game? Like every time someone comes in contact with Giselle and they leave happier, she leaves sadder, because she has a finite amount of this Disney enchantment built up. So every time she spreads her joy, it's literally draining the life from her slowly until she just becomes a nasty, New Yorker.
Well, I mean, even the last scene of her with her family, I mean, she's not really, there's nothing particularly enchanted about her in that scene. She seems nice enough. They seem to be having fun, but like the magic is gone, it seems, maybe from her somewhat.
There's a scene when Robert's daughter takes Giselle out, and this is where they go shopping, and they do kind of like
where an 8-year-old gets a credit card. Man, my 15-year-old can't touch my credit card. How's an 8-year-old get a credit card?
Yeah, the 8-year-old takes the credit card. Well, she says my dad says it's only for emergencies, and this is an emergency. And then when she goes out, again, some sort of self-aware Disney stuff. And this one was a little bit, I mean, this was an adult situation, but they go out and they're getting like their hair done or their nails did or whatever it is. And the girl's talking to Giselle, and she's like, we don't want to go overboard because then boys will get the wrong idea. And you know how boys are. They're only after one thing. And Giselle's to the 8-year-old is like, and what's that? And the 8-year-old's like, I don't know. Nobody will tell me. And not only was this sort of a dark adult, kind of a humorous joke, because no one wants to tell this 8-year-old girl what boys are only after one thing really means, and boys will get the wrong idea. But there were actual 8-year-olds that watched this movie that on the way home were like, Mommy, what was that joke about? No one will tell me. And they also had to perpetuate, like, oh, I don't know, honey. It was just some silly, because how do you honestly answer that question to your 8-year-old daughter? That's like, Mommy, what do they say when they mean boys are only after one thing? What does that mean? What do you tell your 8-year-olds?
Well, you don't tell to the Disney princess, I guess, as we learned from the movie. They just get to continue being confused for whatever time. You think you know about birds and bees? She lives with them in her little fantasy forest.
What a wild concept! Just outside of the movie breakdown and outside of all the Disney stuff, that you can tell your child growing up, hey, there's a very dangerous thing that could happen to you. Like, we're all concerned for you, and you need to be on the lookout for this thing. It's so dangerous, but we can't actually tell you what that is. What a strange type of existential dread you're putting on in 8-year-olds, to just let them know that there's something so horrible that might happen to them, but we can't tell you what that horrible thing is. I don't know. I don't know what that feeling is like, but it doesn't sound fun.
No. Do you have any other things you want to jump into for this one?
I think it's also worth pointing out that Giselle, she does not get tricked into eating that third final poison apple. She willingly bites into it. The stepmother tells her, hey, here's this apple, and if you bite into it, you'll forget everything that happened up to this point. And she bites into it, meaning that once that she had a taste of reality, once that she got to kind of like enter the world of knowledge of good and evil and the whole thing, like entered this 3-dimensional reality, it was so much that she would rather revert back into her infantile state before she knew what chest hair and anger felt like. That she was ready to just go back. Yeah, she took the blue pill essentially at the end of this movie willingly. So I don't know. I felt that was symbolic.
Cypher steak. That's what she wants.
What else? Oh, at the very end, she runs away and she leaves behind a transparent shoe, which then turns into like a glass slipper sort of scene at the end where the prince puts it on Robert's now ex-fiance, and he's like, oh, it's a perfect fit. It's kind of weird. Like, that's not that's not your shoe, but they put it on you anyways. And then finally, this is where they telegraph the Girlboss moment at the very end. The stepmother turns into this evil CGI dragon, and it steals Robert and brings Robert up to the top of the spire on this building that they're at. And as she's doing this, the stepmother literally says, oh my, what a twist. It's the princess coming to the rescue. I guess that makes you the damsel in distress, handsome? So like that, it's pretty much, if you didn't already get that they have inverted it, they were letting all of the kids know, hey, we've inverted the logic. What Disney has now entered this new world where it's the princess that's going to be saving the stupid prince throughout most of the coming movies. So I don't know. I feel that it's noteworthy that it's almost like Disney breaks the fourth wall and talks to the audience directly about that.
Yeah, this is the first successful Disney movie for several years, and after this, things start to get on the up and up for them. So it is sort of establishing, the vibe that we're going to have for the next 10 to 15 years.
And it's two-way. But not only does Giselle save Robert because he becomes that damsel in distress, but then when we go back to the cartoon world, we see that Nancy, who's Robert's now ex-fiance, just married Edward, the prince. But Nancy like flips Edward over and kisses him when it's like, you may now kiss the bride. She's like, screw that. And she flips the prince over and kisses him. So it's like that double inversion. So that was interesting just because it was not subtle.
Right. I guess we'll start winding this one down for this day. If you want to get into what's up on your end.
I just want to keep pushing more of this Occult Disney. If you haven't gone back and checked the episodes we did on anime, we did Totoro, we did Perfect Blue, we did Summer Wars, we did Your Name. And even though those aren't Disney movies, we had a lot of fun watching them. They were legitimately great movies. and the response has been really good. So I do think that we should do some more anime sort of endeavors in the coming future here. So look out
Ponyo's
for
coming
more
up
of
pretty
that.
soon, so we will be doing Ponyo pretty soon. Speaking of some Little Mermaid stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, occultdisney.com, while it still exists. I might even put together a few Occult Disney shirts, although I don't want the smoke from Disney corporate, so I'll probably make them Patreon only releases where they won't be like publicly advertised or anything, but you will hopefully see me rocking some Occult Disney shirts in the coming weeks or months, and I'll make sure you know where to grab those. But go to the Patreon. If you haven't already, you'll be able to get these videos weeks ahead of time. All sorts of interviews, lots more content coming up. So appreciate everyone that has subscribed to the Patreon and to the YouTube members. Keep them coming.
Okay, that plugs us. So I guess that does it. Let's get Enchanted, at least till we get disenchanted later.
Ready for a cosmic conspiracy about Stanley Kubrick, moon landings, and the CIA? Go visit nasacomic.com.
nasacomic.com, CIA's biggest con. Stanley Kubrick put us on, that's why we're singing this song. I'm nasacomic.com, go visit nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com. Oh, nasacomic.com, CIA's biggest con. Stanley Kubrick put us on, that's why we're singing this song. I'm nasacomic.com, go visit nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com.
Never a Straight Answer is a 40-page comic about Stanley Kubrick directing the Apollo space missions.
Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com.
This is the perfect read for comic, Kubrick, or conspiracy fans of all ages. For more details, visit nasacomic.com.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hate, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Matters not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when a beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.